Fear is universal. We all experience it. And today I want to talk with you about staying fearless and conquering those fears that might be holding you back from the life you truly deserve. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever had an opportunity come your way, something that excited you, something that could have changed your life, but you let it slip away because you were afraid? Maybe you were afraid of failure. Maybe you were afraid of success. Maybe you were afraid of what others might think. Or maybe you were afraid that you simply weren't good enough. If you answered yes, don't feel bad. You're in good company. Every single person in this room, including myself, has felt that way at some point. But here's what separates the successful from the unsuccessful, what they do with that fear. You see, fear is not meant to be a prison. Fear is meant to be a compass. It points toward the areas of your life that need attention, that need growth. The successful among us understand that on the other side of fear is growth. And on the other side of growth is opportunity. And on the other side of opportunity is the life you've always dreamed of living. I remember when I was just starting out, I was terrified of public speaking. Absolutely terrified. My palms would sweat, my heart would race, and my mind would go completely blank. But I knew that if I wanted to share my message with more people, if I wanted to make a bigger impact, I had to face that fear. I couldn't go around it. I couldn't go under it. I had to go through it. And that's the first principle I want to share with you today. The only way out is through. Most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid fear. They construct elaborate systems and excuses to ensure they never have to face the things that scare them. But what they don't realize is that by avoiding their fears, they're also avoiding their growth, their opportunities, and ultimately their dreams. The only way to conquer your fears is to face them head on, to walk directly into them. To say, yes, I'm afraid, but I'm going to do this anyway. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should be reckless. I'm not suggesting that you should jump out of a plane without a parachute just because you're afraid of heights. What I am suggesting is that you should identify the fears that are holding you back from your goals and then take measured, consistent action to overcome them. If you're afraid of public speaking, start by speaking up more in meetings. If you're afraid of rejection, start making one sales call each day. If you're afraid of financial risk, start by setting aside a small amount of money each month to invest. Small, consistent actions compound over time. And before you know it, the very things that used to paralyze you with fear become second nature. You know, I've always said that if you work harder on yourself than you do on your job, your income will take care of itself. The same principle applies to fear. If you work harder on conquering your fears than you do on avoiding them, your courage will take care of itself. And that brings me to my second principle. Fear diminishes in the face of knowledge. One of the primary reasons we fear certain things is because we don't fully understand them. We fear the unknown, but when we take the time to educate ourselves, to become knowledgeable about the things that scare us, those fears begin to lose their power. If you're afraid of investing in the stock market, read books about investing, take a course. Talk to successful investors. The more you understand about how the market works, the less intimidating it becomes. If you're afraid of starting a business, study successful business models. Learn about marketing, sales, operations. The more you understand about how businesses function, the more confident you'll become in your ability to start one. Knowledge truly is power. It turns the unknown into the known, the intimidating into the familiar, and the fearful into the doable. I remember a gentleman who came to one of my seminars several years ago. He told me he was terrified of investing in real estate, even though he knew it could be a pathway to wealth. When I asked him why, he said, "Jim, I just don't understand it. It seems so complicated, and I'm afraid of making a mistake that could cost me everything." I suggested that he dedicate just 1 hour each day to learning about real estate investing. Read books, listen to podcasts, talk to successful real estate investors, and attend local real estate meetings. A year later, he came back to another one of my seminars. He was a changed man. He had purchased his first investment property, and it was already generating positive cash flow. The fear that had once paralyzed him had been replaced by knowledge, and that knowledge had given him the confidence to take action. That's the power of education. That's the power of turning the unknown into the known. Now, here's something I want you to keep in mind. The acquisition of knowledge is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing process. The world is constantly changing, and what worked yesterday might not work tomorrow. The successful among us are those who commit to lifelong learning, who remain curious, who continuously seek to expand their understanding of the world around them. And that brings me to my third principle. Fear loses its power in the company of others. You see, one of the most insidious aspects of fear is that it often makes us feel isolated, like we're the only ones struggling, the only ones afraid. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Every person you admire, every successful individual who seems to have it all together has faced fear. They've had moments of doubt, moments when they weren't sure if they could make it. The difference is that they didn't face those fears alone. They surrounded themselves with others who could offer support, guidance, and perspective. They built a network of like-minded individuals who were on similar journeys, who understood the challenges and the fears that come with growth and success. I've often said that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. This principle applies not just to income or success, but to courage as well. If you spend time with fearful people, people who are always looking for what could go wrong, you'll likely become more fearful yourself. But if you spend time with courageous people, people who face their fears and take action anyway, you'll likely become more courageous as well. So I encourage you to seek out communities of growth-minded individuals, join mastermind groups, attend seminars and workshops, connect with others who are on similar journeys. Share your fears, your challenges, your setbacks, and your victories. Learn from each other. Support each other. Grow together. I remember a young woman who was a part of one of my mastermind groups. She was brilliant with a business idea that had tremendous potential, but she was paralyzed by the fear of failure. Every time she was close to launching her business, she would find a reason to delay, to gather more information, to make one more tweak to her business plan. But being a part of our mastermind group changed everything for her. She saw others facing similar fears and taking action anyway. She received feedback and encouragement from the group, and perhaps most importantly, she realized that she wasn't alone in her fear. We were all there with her, supporting her, believing in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. 2 months after joining our group, she finally launched her business. It wasn't perfect. First attempts rarely are, but it was a start. And over time, with continued support and accountability from the group, her business began to thrive. That's the power of community. That's the power of facing your fears together. Now, let's talk about my 4th principle. Fear often grows in the soil of perfectionism. Many of us are afraid to take action because we're waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect circumstances. We tell ourselves that once everything is just right, then we'll be ready to move forward. But here's the truth: perfect is the enemy of done. The successful among us understand that action beats inaction every time. They understand that it's better to take imperfect action now than to wait for perfect action later, because later often never comes. I'm reminded of a quote by General George S. Patton: "A good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan executed next week." This principle is true in war, in business, and in life. Think about the major innovations that have shaped our world. They weren't born perfect. They evolved over time through a process of trial and error, feedback, and adjustment. The first automobiles, the first airplanes, the first computers, they were all rudimentary compared to what we have today. But they were a start, and without that start, we wouldn't have the advanced versions we enjoy now. The same is true for your dreams, your goals, your ambitions. They don't need to be perfect to be valuable. They just need to exist to be brought into the world so they can evolve and improve over time. So if perfectionism is feeding your fear, if it's keeping you stuck in the planning phase instead of the action phase, I encourage you to adopt a new mantra: progress over perfection. Commit to taking small, consistent actions every day, even if they're not perfect. Over time, those small actions will compound, leading to significant results. This brings me to my 5th principle: fear often disguises itself as practicality. Have you ever had a dream, an idea, a goal that excited you, that made you come alive, only to talk yourself out of it because it wasn't practical? Maybe you wanted to start a business, but you told yourself it wasn't practical because you had bills to pay. Maybe you wanted to pursue a passion, but you told yourself it wasn't practical because you didn't have enough time. Maybe you wanted to make a bold move, but you told yourself it wasn't practical because it was too risky. Now, I'm not suggesting that practicality isn't important. We all have responsibilities and constraints that we need to consider. But too often what we label as practical is really just fear in disguise. It's fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of stepping outside our comfort zones. The truly successful among us understand how to balance practicality with possibility. They understand how to honor their responsibilities while still pursuing their dreams. They find creative ways to make the impractical practical, to turn dreams into realities. I remember a conversation I had with a gentleman who wanted to start his own business but kept telling himself it wasn't practical because he had a family to support. When I dug deeper, it became clear that he was using his family as an excuse to avoid facing his fear of failure. So I asked him a question that changed everything. What's the most practical thing you can do for your family? In the long run, stay in a job that limits your income and fulfillment. Or build a business that could provide financial abundance and show your children what's possible when you have the courage to follow your dreams. Put in those terms, starting a business wasn't just a dream, it was the most practical thing he could do for his family. But it required him to see past his fear, to recognize that what he had been calling practical was really just a limitation he had placed on himself. So if you find yourself dismissing dreams or opportunities because they're not practical, I encourage you to dig deeper. Ask yourself if practicality is really the issue or if fear is the root cause. And remember, the most practical thing you can do for your future self is to face your fears today. Now, let's talk about my sixth principle. Fear feeds on negative self-talk. The way we talk to ourselves has a profound impact on our courage, our confidence, and our ability to take action in the face of fear. If your internal dialogue is filled with phrases like "I can't," "I'm not good enough," "what if I fail," then you're essentially programming yourself for fear and inaction. The successful among us understand the power of internal dialogue. They've learned to replace limiting self-talk with empowering self-talk. They've learned to question negative thoughts and replace them with more positive, more accurate ones. For example, instead of saying, "I can't do this," they might say, "I haven't learned how to do this yet, but I can learn." Instead of saying, "What if I fail?" they might say, "What if I succeed? And even if I don't, what's the worst that could happen, and what could I learn from it?" This shift in self-talk doesn't happen overnight. It requires conscious effort, constant vigilance, and regular practice. But over time, as you replace negative self-talk with positive self-talk, you'll find that your fears begin to lose their power. You'll find that the voice of fear gets quieter while the voice of courage gets louder. I remember a young man who came to one of my workshops. He was incredibly talented, with a natural gift for communication and leadership. But he was held back by his negative self-talk. Every time an opportunity presented itself, his mind would flood with thoughts like, "You're not ready, you're going to embarrass yourself, no one will take you seriously." During our workshop, we spent time identifying these negative thought patterns and replacing them with more positive, more empowering ones. It wasn't easy for him. These patterns had been ingrained over many years, but he committed to the process. 6 months later, he reached out to share his progress. He had taken on a leadership role at his company, something he would have avoided in the past. He was speaking up more in meetings, sharing his ideas, and making meaningful contributions. And while the negative thoughts still crept in occasionally, he had learned to recognize them for what they were, just thoughts, not truths, and to replace them with more empowering alternatives. That's the power of transforming your self-talk. That's the power of becoming the master of your own mind. And now for my seventh principle, fear is diminished by definite purpose. When you have a compelling purpose, a clear vision of what you want to achieve and why it matters, fear takes a back seat. It doesn't disappear completely. Few things in life are that simple, but it loses its power to paralyze you. Your purpose becomes the driving force that propels you forward, even when fear is present. Think about it. When you're deeply committed to a cause, when you're passionate about a goal, when you believe wholeheartedly in a vision, you're willing to face discomfort, uncertainty, and yes, fear to bring that vision to life. This is why I always emphasize the importance of setting clear, compelling goals. Not just any goals, but goals that excite you, that align with your values, that contribute to your sense of purpose and meaning. When you have such goals, fear becomes not an obstacle, but a signpost pointing you toward the areas where growth is needed. I remember a conversation I had with a successful entrepreneur who had built a multi-million-dollar business from scratch. When I asked him about fear, he said something that has stuck with me. "Jim, I've never not been afraid, but I've always been more committed to my purpose than to my comfort." That's the mindset of the successful. They're not fearless. They simply value their purpose more than they fear discomfort or uncertainty. So if fear is holding you back, I encourage you to clarify your purpose. Get clear on what you want, why you want it, and how achieving it will contribute to your life and the lives of those around you. Make your purpose so compelling, so exciting, that it overshadows your fears. Now, let's discuss my eighth principle. Fear is a poor predictor of the future. One of the reasons fear wields such power is that it paints vivid pictures of potential negative outcomes. It tells us stories about all the terrible things that could happen if we take a risk, make a change, or step outside our comfort zones. But here's the truth. Fear is a pessimistic fortune teller, consistently overestimating the likelihood and severity of negative outcomes while underestimating our ability to handle challenges. Think about your own life. Think Think about the times when you were afraid to do something but did it anyway. How often did your worst fears come true? And even when challenges did arise, how often were you able to handle them better than you expected? Most of us discover that our fears are much worse than our realities. We create elaborate disaster scenarios in our minds, most of which never materialize. And even when difficulties do arise, we find that we're more resilient, more resourceful, and more capable than our fears gave us credit for. I remember a gentleman who was terrified of leaving his secure job to start a consulting business. He had a list of fears a mile long. What if he couldn't find clients? What if he couldn't pay his bills? What if he had to crawl back to his old employer and beg for his job back? Despite these fears, he decided to take the leap. And yes, he faced challenges. It took longer than expected to build a stable client base. There were months when money was tight, but none of the catastrophic scenarios he had imagined to pass. He never had to beg for his old job back. He never went bankrupt. He never lost his home. In fact, within 2 years, his consulting business was thriving, providing him with more income, more flexibility, and more fulfillment than his previous job ever did. His fears had been poor predictors of his future. So the next time fear paints a grim picture of what might happen if you take a risk or make a change, remember to question that picture. Ask yourself, is this fear based on facts or assumptions? Is it accurately predicting the future, or is it catastrophizing? And even if challenges do arise, am I capable of handling them? More often than not, you'll find that your fears are overblown and your capabilities are underestimated. For my ninth principle, fear is transformed through consistent action. Many people believe that they need to wait until their fear subsides before they can take action. They think, once I'm no longer afraid, then I'll start that business, have that difficult conversation, make that bold move. But that's not how courage works. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action in the presence of fear. And the more consistently you act in the face of fear, the more that fear transforms into confidence. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. The first time you got on a bike, you were probably afraid of falling. But you didn't wait until that fear disappeared before you started pedaling. You felt the fear, and you pedaled anyway. And with each successful ride, your fear decreased while your confidence increased. Eventually, riding a bike became second nature, something you could do without even thinking about it. The same principle applies to all areas of life. The fears that seem insurmountable now can be transformed through consistent action. Each time you face a fear and take action anyway, you're building your courage muscle. You're proving to yourself that you can feel fear and still function, still move forward, still succeed. I remember a woman who came to one of my seminars. She had a dream of creating online courses, but she was terrified of being on camera. The thought of recording herself made her physically ill with anxiety, but she had a message she believed in, a message she felt could help others, so she committed to facing her fear. She started small, recording short videos that only she would see. Then she shared them with a trusted friend for feedback. Then she created a short course for a small, supportive audience. With each step, her fear didn't disappear, but it became more manageable. And more importantly, her confidence grew. After a year of consistent action, she had created multiple successful courses and had built a thriving online business. The fear that once paralyzed her had been transformed through consistent action. So if you're waiting for your fear to subside before you take action, I encourage you to flip that equation. Take action consistently and your fear will subside as a result. For my 10th principle, fear is often a signal that you're on the right track. This might sound counterintuitive, but bear with me. When you're pushing the boundaries of your comfort zone, when you're pursuing growth and expansion, when you're moving toward your dreams, fear is a natural companion. It's a sign that you're not settling, that you're not playing small, that you're stretching yourself in ways that lead to growth. The absence of fear, on the other hand, can sometimes be a warning sign. It might indicate that you're staying too comfortable, too familiar, too safe. It might suggest that you're not challenging yourself enough, not reaching for your full potential. I'm reminded of a quote by the novelist John A. Shedd, "A ship in harbor is safe, but that's not what ships are built for." You were built to stay safe in the harbor of comfort and familiarity. You were built to sail the open seas of possibility, even when those seas get rough, even when the journey involves fear. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should constantly feel afraid. That's not a healthy way to live. But I am suggesting that if you never feel fear, if all your decisions and actions feel completely safe and comfortable, you might be limiting your growth and potential. I remember a conversation I had with a successful business owner who had built an empire from scratch. When I asked him about the role of fear in his journey, he said, "Jim, I've learned to see fear as a compass. When I feel fear, I know I'm heading in the direction of growth. And growth is where the opportunities lie. So the next time you feel fear, before you retreat back to the familiar, ask yourself, is this fear pointing me toward growth? Is it signaling an opportunity for expansion? If the answer is yes, that fear might just be telling you that you're on the right track. For my 11th principle, fear is mitigated by preparation. While it's true that we can't eliminate all uncertainty or predict every possible outcome, there's tremendous power in preparation. When you've done your homework, when you've developed the necessary skills, when you've created contingency plans, fear loses much of its grip. Think about it from a practical standpoint. If you're afraid of public speaking, but you've practiced your speech hundreds of times, if you know your material inside and out, if you've anticipated potential questions and prepared thoughtful answers, your fear, while still present, will be far less debilitating than if you were to walk on stage completely unprepared. The same principle applies in business, in relationships, in any area of life where fear might hold you back. Preparation doesn't eliminate fear, but it does give you a solid foundation from which to face it. I remember a young entrepreneur who was terrified of pitching his business to potential investors. The thought of standing in front of a room full of successful, scrutinizing business people made his heart race and his palms sweat. But instead of letting that fear paralyze him, he channeled it into preparation. He researched each investor thoroughly, understanding their investment preferences and past successes. He practiced his pitch until he could deliver it in his sleep. He anticipated potential objections and prepared thoughtful responses. He even created backup plans for various scenarios that might unfold during the pitch. When the day of the pitch finally arrived, was he still afraid? Absolutely. But that fear no longer controlled him. It no longer threatened to derail his performance. It had been mitigated by thorough, thoughtful preparation. So if there's something you're afraid to do, something that's holding you back from your goals, ask yourself, how could preparation help me face this fear? What skills do I need to develop? What information do I need to gather? What plans do I need to create? Then channel your energy into that preparation, knowing that it's building the foundation for your courage. For my 12th principle, fear is conquered one small step at a time. Often when we think about facing our fears, we imagine dramatic, all-or-nothing moments, diving headfirst into the deep end, taking a massive leap of faith. And while there's certainly a place for bold action, most fears are conquered through a series of small, manageable steps, each one building upon the last. This approach, often called gradual exposure in psychology, allows you to build confidence incrementally, to prove to yourself through small victories that you can indeed face your fears and survive, even thrive in the process. Let's say you're afraid of public speaking, a common fear, and one I've mentioned earlier. A gradual approach might look like this. First, practice speaking to yourself in the mirror. Then record yourself and watch the recording. Next, speak to a supportive friend or family member. Then to a small group of friends. Then to a slightly larger group, perhaps in a low-stakes setting like a local club or organization. And finally, when you've built enough confidence through these small steps, you take on the challenge of speaking to a larger audience. Each step is challenging but manageable, and each success builds your confidence for the next challenge. I remember working with a gentleman who was paralyzed by the fear of financial risk. The thought of investing his money, of potentially losing what he had worked so hard to earn, kept him from building the wealth he desired. So we created a gradual approach to facing this fear. He started by educating himself about investing, reading books, and attending workshops. No money at risk, just learning. Then he set up a paper trading account where he could practice investing without using real money. Next, he invested a small amount, an amount he could afford to lose without significant hardship. As he gained confidence and saw returns on his investments, he gradually increased the amount, always staying within the boundaries of what felt challenging but not overwhelming. Today, he has a diversified investment portfolio that has significantly increased his net worth and set him on the path to financial freedom. He didn't conquer his fear overnight with one bold move. He conquered it step by step, inch by inch, through a series of small but meaningful victories. So if you're facing a fear that seems insurmountable, I encourage you to break it down into smaller, more manageable steps. Ask yourself, what's one small action I can take today toward facing this fear? Then take that action, and then another, and another. Before you know it, you'll look back and realize how far you've come one small step at a time. For my 13th principle, fear is diminished by a focus on service. When you're focused on yourself, on how you might fail, on what others might think of you, on what you stand to lose, fear often grows stronger. But when you shift your focus to others, to how you can serve, to the value you can provide, to the difference you can make, fear often loses its power. Think about it. The parent who rushes into a burning building to save their child isn't thinking about their own fear. They're thinking about their child's safety. The business leader who navigates a company through a crisis isn't focused on their own reputation. They're focused on the welfare of their employees and customers. The speaker who overcomes stage fright to deliver a powerful message isn't thinking about their own discomfort. They're thinking about the impact their message could have on the audience. When you're driven by a desire to serve, to contribute, to make a difference, fear takes a backseat to purpose. I remember a conversation I had with a successful author who had once been paralyzed by the fear of criticism and rejection. She told me that the turning point came when she stopped focusing on how her work would be received and started focusing on how it could help others. I realized that if my book could help even one person through a difficult time, if it could offer comfort or insight or hope to someone who needed it, then it was worth facing my fear of criticism, she said. When I shifted my focus from myself to my readers, from my fear to their needs, writing became less about exposing myself to potential criticism and more about offering something of value to others. Our first book went on to become a bestseller, touching the lives of not just one, but thousands of readers. And while she still feels a twinge of fear with each new book she releases, that fear no longer stops her from sharing her gifts with the world. So, if fear is holding you back, I encourage you to shift your focus from yourself to those you can serve. Ask yourself, who needs what I have to offer? Whose life could be improved by my gifts, my knowledge, my presence? When you focus on service, on the value you can provide, fear loses much of its power to hold you back. For my 14th principle, fear is transformed by perspective. The way we perceive our fears, the meaning we assign to them, the stories we tell ourselves about them, can either empower us or diminish us. The successful among us have learned to reframe their fears, to see them not as barriers but as opportunities, not as warnings to retreat but as invitations to grow. I remember a conversation I had with a successful entrepreneur who told me I used to see fear as a warning sign, a red light telling me to stop. Now I see it as a green light, signaling that I'm about to enter a territory rich with opportunity. This shift in perspective didn't happen overnight. It came through experience, through repeatedly facing fears and discovering that on the other side of fear was not disaster, but growth, not failure, but learning, not loss, but gain. The same entrepreneur shared another powerful perspective shift. I used to ask myself, what if I fail? Now I ask, what if I don't try? What opportunities might I miss? What potential might go unfulfilled? What regrets might I have? This simple change in questioning transformed his relationship with fear. It didn't eliminate the fear. Few things in life are that straightforward, but it changed the way he responded to it. It changed the choices he made, the actions he took, and ultimately the life he created. So if fear is holding you back, I encourage you to experiment with different perspectives. Could your fear be telling you something important about what you value? Could it be pointing you toward an area of potential growth? Could it be a natural part of the journey toward your goals, not an obstacle but a companion? By changing your perspective on fear, you can transform it from a barrier to a bridge, from an enemy to an ally, from a stop sign to a starting line. For my 15th principle, fear is conquered through self-belief. At the core of many fears is a fundamental question, am I capable? Can I handle the challenges, the setbacks, the unknowns? Do I have what it takes to succeed, to recover from failure, to adapt to change? In short, do I believe in myself? The successful among us have developed a deep, abiding belief in their own capabilities. Not a belief that they'll never fail, that would be naive. Not a belief that they have all the answers, that would be arrogant. But a belief that they can learn, that they can grow, that they can persevere through challenges and emerge stronger on the other side. This self-belief isn't born of blind optimism. It's born of experience, of facing difficulties and finding a way through, of falling down and getting back up, of proving to oneself through action and perseverance that challenges can be overcome and goals can be achieved. I remember a conversation I had with a woman who had built a successful business after experiencing multiple setbacks and failures. When I asked her about the role of self-belief in her journey, she said, "Jim, my belief in myself wasn't something I started with. It was something I earned through constantly showing up, through doing the hard things, through proving to myself that I could handle whatever came my way." Her words highlight an important truth. Self-belief isn't just a thought or a feeling. It's a practice, a habit, a way of showing up in the world. It's built through consistent action, through facing fears, through taking risks, through learning from failures and building on successes. So, if you struggle with self-belief, if the voice in your head often tells you that you can't, that you're not good enough, that you don't have what it takes, I want to encourage you to start small. Set a modest goal and achieve it. Then set a slightly bigger goal and achieve that too. With each achievement, your self-belief will grow. With each challenge overcome, your confidence will increase. And as your belief in yourself grows stronger, you'll find that your fears begin to lose their power. They don't disappear completely. Remember, courage isn't the absence of fear, but they no longer control your actions or limit your possibilities. Stay fearless isn't about never feeling fear. It's about not letting fear dictate your choices, your actions, your life. It's about acknowledging the fear, respecting it for what it's trying to tell you, and then making the choice to move forward anyway, guided not by fear, but by purpose, by passion, by a vision of what's possible. I believe that within each of us is a reservoir of courage waiting to be tapped. I believe that with the right mindset, the right strategies, and consistent action, you can transform your relationship with fear from one of paralysis to one of empowerment. You can learn to see fear not as an enemy to be avoided, but as a companion on the journey toward your best self, your best life. You can learn to use fear as a compass, pointing you toward the areas of growth that will yield the greatest rewards. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate fear from your life. It's neither possible nor desirable. The goal is to build your courage muscle so strong, so resilient, that when fear arises, you can acknowledge it, learn from it, and then take action anyway. In the words of Nelson Mandela, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. Today, I challenge you to take one small step toward conquering a fear that's been holding you back. It doesn't have to be a giant leap. Remember, fear is conquered one small step at a time. Just take one action, however modest, that moves you toward your goal, toward your vision, toward the life you truly desire. And then tomorrow, take another step, and another the day after that. Before you know it, you'll look back and marvel at the distance you've traveled, at the fears you've conquered, at the person you've become. The journey toward a fearless life isn't always easy. There will be moments of doubt, moments of discomfort, moments when you'll be tempted to retreat back to the familiar. But I believe in you. I believe that you have within you everything you need to face your fears and create the life you deserve. Stay fearless, my friends, not because you never feel fear, but because you never let fear have the final word. You know, as I've traveled around the world speaking to thousands of people, I've come to a profound realization: the quality of our lives is directly proportional to the amount of uncertainty we can comfortably live with. The more comfortable we become with uncertainty, with the unknown, with the risk of failure or rejection, the more freedom we have to pursue our dreams, to express our true selves, to live without the constraints of fear.